Number 1. The Orzeł. She was the pride of a nation, and she disappeared without a single witness. The Orzeł, whose name means eagle in Polish, was a modern ocean-going submarine, laid down in 1936 at a Dutch shipyard and commissioned into the Polish Navy on the 2nd of February, 1939. Part of her cost had been raised by public subscription, coins gathered from ordinary Poles, which made her something more than a warship. She measured about 84 meters long and displaced roughly 1,100 tons on the surface. She carried 12 torpedo tubes and a 105mm deck gun. Her sister boat was called the Sap. When war broke out on the 1st of September, 1939, the Orzeł was on patrol in the Baltic. Her captain fell ill and she put into the neutral port of Tallinn in Estonia on the 14th of September to land him. But Estonia, pressured by Germany, began to intern the boat. Guards came aboard. They stripped out her breech blocks, seized her charts, and started removing her torpedoes. The crew were about to lose their submarine without ever firing her in anger. On the night of the 17th of September, the crew fought back. They overpowered the Estonian guards and drove the Orzeł out of the harbor in the dark. This became known as the Orzeł incident, and it carried real weight. The Soviet Union used the escape as a pretext to press Estonia harder, part of the chain of events that ended Baltic independence. Now consider the position the crew were in. Their charts were gone. So they navigated from memory, from a chart drawn by hand, across a sea patrolled by the enemy. And it worked. On the 14th of October, 1939, the Orzeł reached Rosyth in Scotland. The escape made headlines around the world. She joined the Royal Navy's operations from Scotland. On the 8th of April, 1940, she torpedoed and sank the German transport Rio de Janeiro off the coast of Norway, one of the first signs that a German invasion was underway. Then, on the 23rd of May, 1940, she left on her 7th war patrol into the North Sea. She never came back. When the recall signal went out on the 8th of June, the Orzeł did not answer. All 63 men aboard were lost. The cause has never been established and the wreck has never been found. She may have struck a mine, British or German. She may have been caught by German anti-submarine forces whose records show no matching kill. She may have suffered an accident in the dark. Modern Polish diving teams have scanned huge stretches of seabed and proposed candidate wrecks, but not one has been confirmed as the Eagle. The most documented escape of the war has the least documented ending. And if fame could not protect her, consider what a single typographical error did to the next boat. Number 2. The USS Grayback. For 75 years, the United States Navy searched for this submarine in the wrong place, not because the ocean hit her, but because a person made a mistake copying a number. The Grayback was a Tambor-class fleet submarine commissioned in June of 1941 at the Electric Boat Yard in Groton, Connecticut. She built an aggressive combat record across 10 war patrols, sinking a string of Japanese ships. In late January of 1944, under Commander John Anderson Moore, she sailed for the East China Sea. Her patrol area ran between the coast of China, Formosa, and the Ryukyu Islands. She was ordered to return to Midway by the 7th of March. She never arrived. On the 30th of March, 1944, she was declared lost with all 80 men aboard. After the war, investigators read Japanese records. Those records described an air attack on the 27th of February, 1944, followed by depth charges from escort vessels. The records also gave a position, and for decades that position was accepted, even though it placed the Grayback far from where she actually lay. The problem was buried in the paperwork. When the Japanese coordinates were transcribed, a single digit in the longitude had been changed. In 2019, a researcher named Yutaka Iwasaki went back to the original Japanese MOBA unit records. He found the error. Correcting that, one digit moved the true position roughly 100 nautical miles from the spot everyone had trusted. That is the difference between searching an empty patch of sea and searching a grave. A team called the Lost 52 Project, led by Tim Taylor, took the corrected data and went looking. In June of 2019, they found her. The Grayback lay about 427 meters down, roughly 50 miles south of Okinawa. Her bow was catastrophically destroyed, consistent with a bomb detonating her forward magazine, which matched the Japanese account of an air attack. The United States Navy confirmed the identification and designated the site a war grave. Families who had waited 3 generations finally learned where their men rested. The New York Times and National Geographic carried the story. And the lesson was uncomfortable. The abyss had not hidden the Grayback. A typing error had. Some boats were lost to mistakes on paper. Others were lost to ambition on a scale that is hard to believe. Number 3, the Surcouf. Imagine a submarine so large it carried battleship-caliber guns and its own aircraft. The Surcouf was a French cruiser submarine launched in 1929 and commissioned in 1934, named after the privateer Robert Surcouf. At about 110 meters long and roughly 4,300 tons submerged, she was the largest submarine in the world until Japan built its I-400 class during the war. Her armament was unlike anything else beneath the waves. She mounted a twin turret of 2 203mm guns, that is 8-inch guns, the largest weapons ever fitted to a submarine. Behind her conning tower sat a hangar holding a small floatplane for scouting and directing her gunfire. She even carried a motorboat. The idea was a commerce raider that could surface and destroy merchant ships with heavy artillery. When France fell in 1940, the Surcouf escaped to Plymouth in England. On the 3rd of July, 1940, during Operation Catapult, British forces seized her, and men died on both sides in the struggle. She then served the Free French, but her reliability and even her loyalty were quietly doubted. Rumors spread, never proven, that she harbored Vichy sympathies or that she was secretly refueling German U-boats. In early 1942, she was ordered to the Pacific by way of the Panama Canal. On the night of the 18th of February 1942, she vanished in the Caribbean Sea. All 130 men aboard were lost, the largest crew lost on any single submarine up to that point. The most widely accepted explanation is a collision in the dark. The American freighter Thomson Likes reported striking a large submerged object near the Panama approaches that night. The crew heard cries in the water afterward but did not stop, fearing a U-boat. Other theories persist. Some argue she was bombed by mistake by American aircraft. Some say a German U-boat sank her. Some blame simple mechanical failure. Her wreck has never been found. The deep water and the uncertain position have defeated every search. The Surcouf became a magnet for conspiracy books, tales of sabotage and secret missions. In the end, her design was judged a failure. A submarine that large was too slow to dive and too hard to maintain, but whatever the truth, 130 men went down in a single night, and no debris field has ever been positively identified as hers. Some vanishings, though, would eventually get an answer, even if it took half a century. Number 4, the Minerve. A submarine can be lost for so long that the technology to find her has to be invented first. The Minerve was a Daphne-class diesel-electric attack submarine of the French Navy commissioned in 1964. On the 27th of January 1968, she was returning to her base at Toulon after an exercise with a maritime patrol aircraft flying overhead. She radioed that she would reach port in about an hour. Then, in worsening weather and rough seas, contact was lost. All 52 men aboard died. She was commanded by Lieutenant André Fauve. Her loss came only weeks after the Israeli submarine Dakar disappeared, and 1968 would prove a catastrophic year for submarines around the world. Searches in 1968 and 1969, including one using the bathyscaphe Archimede, found nothing. Investigators considered several causes: a valve or snorkel failure that let the sea flood in, a jammed rudder, a collision. None could be confirmed, because there was nothing to examine. The wreck stayed hidden for 51 years. It became one of the great unresolved cases in French naval history. Then, in 2019, the search reopened, driven by the families of the crew and backed by the Navy and even the President. This time the tools were different. The American company Ocean Infinity brought its vessel, the Seabed Constructor, which deployed a fleet of autonomous underwater vehicles that could survey the seafloor with a precision unthinkable in the 1960s. On the 22nd of July, 2019, they found her. The Minerve lay about 45 kilometers off Toulon, at a depth of roughly 2,370 meters. Her hull was broken into 3 main pieces on the seabed. The French Defense Minister, Florence Parly, announced the discovery. For the families, it was closure after 5 decades of silence. That depth explains why the earlier searches failed. 2,370 meters was simply beyond reach in 1968. The find also renewed scrutiny of the safety of the Daphne class. The same company had become known for deep ocean searches, including work connected to the missing airliner known as Flight 370. Modern robotics had finally solved a Cold War vanishing. And if 51 years sounds like an unbearable wait, one submarine on this list stayed missing for more than a century. Number 5, the HMAS AE1. She was Australia's first submarine, and she became Australia's longest mystery. The AE1 was an E-class boat built by Vickers in England and commissioned in 1914. Together with her sister, the AE2, she made a remarkable delivery voyage, 83 days and 13,000 nautical miles from England to Australia, a record for a submarine at the time. When the First World War began, she supported the Australian force that captured German New Guinea. On the 14th of September, 1914, the AE1 was patrolling off the Duke of York Islands near Rabaul on New Britain. That evening, she failed to return to harbor. 35 men were lost, a crew of Australians, Britons, and New Zealanders. It was Australia's first major loss of the war and the first vessel lost by the Royal Australian Navy. In 1914, no wreckage and no survivors were found. The cause was a blank. The leading theories were a diving accident in which she lost control and sank below the depth her hull could withstand, or a strike on a reef, or a mechanical failure. And there the matter rested for a very long time. At least a dozen expeditions across the decades went looking, and everyone came home empty. Then, in December of 2017, the search vessel Fugro Equator located her off the Duke of York Islands. She lay at a depth of about 300 meters. The wreck was relatively intact, which told investigators she had sunk largely in one piece. The evidence pointed to a flooding or diving accident, perhaps a ventilation valve or a hull opening left in the wrong position, sending her down in a slide she could not stop. The discovery had been funded by the Australian government together with private donors and coordinated with the Australian National Maritime Museum. A commemorative service was held, and the site was protected as a war grave. Descendants of the lost crew attended the memorials more than a century after the men vanished. That intact hull helped rule out an attack because no combat had been recorded in those waters. 103 years is the longest wait on this list before an answer came. But finding a lost submarine does not always take a government. Sometimes it takes a family. Number 6, the USS Grunion. 3 brothers spent years and their own money searching for the submarine that carried their father to the bottom of the sea. The Grunion was a Gatto-class fleet submarine, commissioned in April of 1942 at Electric Boat. She was commanded by Lieutenant Commander Mannert Abele, known as Jim. On her way to the Pacific, she rescued 16 survivors from a torpedoed army transport in the Caribbean, a small act of mercy before the fighting. She was sent to the Aleutian Islands, where Japan had occupied Attu and Kiska. Near Kiska in late July of 1942, she reported sinking 2 subchasers. Her last message came on the 30th of July. She described heavy anti-submarine activity and was ordered back to Dutch Harbor. She never arrived. 70 men were lost, and she was declared missing in October of 1942. For decades, no one knew why. The theories were the usual grim menu: a depth charge, a mine, an accident. A clue survived in Japanese sources. A freighter, the Kano Maru, had fought a submarine off Kiska. Post-war accounts raised 2 possibilities. The Grunion might have been struck by her own torpedo running in a circle, a real and terrifying danger of the era, or she might have been hit by the Kano Maru's return fire. The captain's 3 sons, Bruce, Brad, and John Abel, decided to find her. John had co-founded the medical device company Boston Scientific, and the family funded a private search. They worked from Japanese records translated by the same researcher, Yutaka Iwasaki, and from a sonar survey in 2006. That survey narrowed the location off Kiska. A contact appeared. In 2007, an expedition sent down a remotely operated vehicle and confirmed it. This was the Grunion. She lay at about 1,000 meters on a steep underwater slope near Kiska. Her bow was separated from the rest of the hull, the signature of an explosion, possibly that circular running torpedo. The United States Navy confirmed the identification in 2008. It was one of the earliest high-profile submarine discoveries funded not by a navy, but by a family. and it became a model for the private searches that followed. The wreck is a war grave, and a memorial honors the crew. The Grunion was found because her captain's sons refused to give up, but some boats leave behind no attacker at all and no wreck to find. Number 7. The USS Escolar. She was brand new on her very first war patrol, and she vanished so cleanly that no enemy ever claimed her. The Escolar was a Below-class fleet submarine, commissioned in June of 1944 at the Cramp Shipbuilding Yard in Philadelphia. Her captain, Commander William Milliken, was an aggressive and respected officer who had earlier commanded an older submarine, also named Thresher. In October of 1944, the Escolar operated as part of a coordinated wolf pack in the Yellow Sea. Her last confirmed contact came around the 17th of October, a radio message to another submarine, the Perch, reporting a surface gun action against a small enemy craft. After that, silence. She was never heard from again, and around 60 to 80 men were lost. The Yellow Sea was a dangerous place, heavily seeded with naval mines by both sides, and that is the heart of the mystery. The most probable cause of the Escolar's loss is that she struck a mine. There is a telling piece of negative evidence. No Japanese anti-submarine force claimed an attack that matches the time and place of her disappearance. When a submarine is lost and no enemy takes credit, a mine becomes the prime suspect because a mine has no crew to file a report. She was declared presumed lost in late 1944. Her patrol area, with its shallow and heavily mined waters, makes her an especially difficult wreck to locate, and no confirmed wreck of the Escolar has ever been found. She remains among the 52 United States submarines counted as lost in the Second World War, several of which have never been located. The Lost 52 project and others continue the search, but the Escolar is still outstanding. The loss of a brand new boat on her first patrol drove home the lethality of mine warfare. Mines leave almost nothing behind, no attacker, no witness, often no wreck within easy reach. That is precisely why so many mine losses became permanent mysteries. The Escolar is the clean vanishing, a modern submarine gone with no one to blame and nothing to find. Yet the rarest fate of all was not an unseen mine. It was being hunted by another submarine. Before that, though, the sea took a second boat of a familiar kind. Number 8. The Eurydice. When a second submarine of the same class dies in the same waters, people stop believing in coincidence. The Eurydice was a Daphne-class attack submarine, the sister of the Minerve, commissioned in 1964 and based at Toulon. On the 4th of March 1970, she was exercising in the Mediterranean off the French Riviera, near Cap Camarat and Saint-Tropez. Contact was lost abruptly. A seismograph on shore reportedly recorded a sharp underwater shock at around the time she disappeared, a rare instrumented trace of the moment of loss. All 57 men aboard died. A surface oil slick and debris were found, and some wreckage was later located on the seabed. What made this catastrophe so alarming was the timing. It came only 2 years after her sister, the Minerve, had vanished in the same stretch of sea. 2 boats of the same class, lost in nearly the same place, within 2 years. Investigators considered an internal explosion, a collision with a surface ship, and a catastrophic failure of the hull. But the pattern itself became the story. Many suspected a structural weakness built into the Daphne design. That suspicion had international weight because the Daphne type had been widely exported to other navies. If there was a flaw in the class, it was not only a French problem. Some of the Eurydice's debris was recovered relatively soon, unlike the total disappearance of the Minerve, but the triggering cause was never conclusively established. The rugged deep floor of the Mediterranean kept a full survey out of reach. The 2 losses, the Minerve in 1968 and the Eurydice in 1970, together became a defining trauma for the French submarine service. France reviewed the snorkel and valve procedures across the fleet and re-examined hull integrity in the class. Memorials at Toulon honor both crews. To this day, the 2 are usually discussed together, offered as evidence that the design carried a latent vulnerability that the sea eventually exposed. The Eurydice belonged to the grim run of submarine disasters between 1968 and 1970. But there is one loss on this list that stands entirely alone, a fate no other American submarine suffered. Number 9. The USS Corvina. Of all the submarines the United States lost in the war, only one was sunk by another submarine while both were at sea. That boat was the Corvina, a Gado-class fleet submarine commissioned in August of 1943 at Electric Boat, and commanded by Commander Roderick Rooney. In November of 1943, she left Pearl Harbor on her very first war patrol. Her orders sent her to patrol the waters south of Truk, a major Japanese naval base in the Caroline Islands. On the 16th of November, 1943, the Japanese submarine I-176, under Lieutenant Commander Yamaguchi, spotted an American submarine running on the surface. The I-176 fired a spread of 3 torpedoes. 2 of them struck home. The target went down in a heavy explosion. After the war, analysts pieced the records together and identified that target as the Corvina. She was lost with all 82 men aboard. That gives the Corvina a grim and singular place in naval history. She is the only American submarine confirmed to have been sunk by an enemy submarine during the Second World War. The attack happened in deep, open Pacific water, far from any land. There were no survivors, and no wreck has ever been found. The water south of Truk runs thousands of meters deep, which puts her grave far beyond an easy search. Her fate was not even understood at the time. It only became clear when Japanese records were examined after the war. There's a bitter irony in the story. A submarine's greatest strength is its ability to hide beneath the surface, yet the Corvina was killed by an enemy doing exactly that. She carried radar and modern equipment, but she was caught on the surface, exposed to an attacker she could not see below her. The attacker did not survive the war either. The 176 was herself sunk by American forces in 1944, so both submarines now lie somewhere on the floor of the Pacific. Submerged submarine against submarine kills were vanishingly rare in that war. Almost every submarine sunk by another was caught on the surface, as the Corvina was. Her loss underscored the danger of operating inside an enemy submarine patrol zone. She is memorialized among the 52 American losses, and her deep grave remains unlocated. Yet the final boat on this list had no enemy at all. Number 10. The USS S-28. There was no torpedo, no mine, and no enemy. The S-28 simply went down during a training exercise, and no one has ever been able to say exactly why. She was an older S-class submarine. The crews called them sugar boats, commissioned in December of 1923, a design that dated to just after the First World War. By the Second World War, the S-boats were obsolescent, used mainly for training and secondary patrols. The S-28 had made earlier war patrols in the Aleutians before being assigned to training duty at Pearl Harbor. On the 4th of July, 1944, she was running a training exercise off Oahu, Hawaii, working with the Coast Guard cutter Reliance. During a practice approach, the S-28 submerged, then contact was lost. She failed to surface. All 49 men aboard were lost, under the command of Lieutenant Commander Jack Campbell. The only trace on the surface was an oil slick found the next day. No mechanical cause was ever established. The possibilities included a flooding accident, a loss of depth control, or an internal failure of some kind. Any of them could send a boat past the depth her hull could survive. And the depth here was extreme. The S-28 sank in water about 8,700 feet deep, roughly 2,600 meters. That was far beyond any hope of recovery for the technology of the day. A court of inquiry examined the loss and could not determine the cause. Because this was a training accident with no enemy involved, the vanishing was a matter of the sea and the machinery alone. For more than 70 years, the wreck stayed lost in the dark off Oahu, unreachable. Then, in 2017, Tim Taylor's Lost 52 project located her, and in 2019, the United States Navy validated the identification of the gravesite, matching design details of the hull to confirm it was the S-28. The cause of her sinking is still undetermined to this day. Her story is a quiet warning. Even in a role considered safe an aging boat in familiar water, the ocean can take everything and leave no explanation. Fatal depths lie just a short distance off the coast of Hawaii. Her crew is commemorated, though she was not lost to enemy action. She closes this countdown as the purest vanishing of all. No enemy, no clear cause. Just a boat that went down on a summer day and stayed hidden for a lifetime before robots finally found her. Step back from the individual stories, and a pattern emerges. These 10 submarines met 3 different fates. 5 of them were eventually found long after they vanished: the Grayback, the Minerve, the AE1, the Grunion, and the S-28. 4 remain missing to this day: the Orzeł, the Surcouf, the Escolar, and the Corvina. And 1, the Eurydice, was partly located, yet its cause was never truly resolved. Look closely at how the found boats were found, and the real lesson appears. Discovery almost never came from luck. It came from someone correcting a human error. A mistranslated coordinate for the Grayback. A search reopened for the Minerve. Decades of refined sonar work for the AE1. Translated enemy records for the Grunion. The ocean rarely hands a boat back. When it does, people first had to fix their own mistakes. Consider the human arithmetic behind these 10 hulls. 63 men on the Orzeł, 130 on the Surcouf, the largest crew lost on any single submarine of its time. 80 on the Grayback, 52 on the Minerve, 35 on the AE1, 70 on the Grunion, 57 on the Eurydice, 82 on the Corvina, 49 on the S-28, and dozens more on the Escolar. Together, these boats carried more than 700 men to the seabed. For 4 of those crews, closure came only decades later. For the rest, the file is still open. Depth was the deciding variable again and again. The boats lost in shallow mined waters like the Escolar are paradoxically harder to sort out because mines leave no attacker and the seabed is cluttered. The boats lost in deep water like the Corvina and the S-28 are hard for the opposite reason: the sheer distance to the bottom. The searches themselves came from different places: a family for the Grunion, a state for the Minerve, a specialist company using autonomous robots. And behind the Pacific losses stood a common key: the patient translation of enemy records that finally explained what American commanders never saw. So what actually happens in those final seconds when a submarine is lost? A submarine lives inside a simple, unforgiving equation. The deeper it goes, the harder the water squeezes. Pressure roughly doubles for every 10 meters of depth, so a hull that is safe near the surface faces crushing loads far below. Every boat has a crush depth, the point where the hull can no longer hold. Past that line, collapse is not gradual. It happens in milliseconds, an implosion that destroys the pressure hull almost instantly. Most losses begin not with a crush, but with water getting in. Flooding can come through a snorkel valve, an air induction, or a battery compartment. This is the heart of the Daphne-class suspicion around the Minerve and the Eurydice, the idea that a valve failed and the sea poured in faster than the crew could react. Once enough water enters, the boat becomes heavy, tips into a dive it cannot arrest, and slides down past the depth it can survive. That cascade may explain the AE1 and the S-28. There are other ways to die. A circular running torpedo, one that curves back toward the boat that fired it, was a genuine hazard, and a leading theory for the Grunion. A naval mine kills without warning and without a witness, which is why the Escolar's loss stayed blank. Older boats risked hydrogen building up from their batteries, and a spark could trigger an explosion. When investigators find a wreck with its bow torn away, they read that as an explosion or a magazine detonation. When they find a hull broken into clean pieces, they often read implosion. The seabed keeps these signatures. The question is whether anyone can reach them. Finding a lost submarine is a problem of searching enormous darkness for a small target. The primary tools are sound. Side-scan sonar sweeps a swath of seabed and returns an image built from echoes. Multi-beam bathymetry maps the shape of the bottom in fine detail. In the last decade, the game changed with autonomous underwater vehicles, robotic craft that fly just above the seafloor for hours, gathering data with no cable to the surface. The company Ocean Infinity built its reputation on fleets of these machines, launched from a vessel like the Seabed Constructor to survey vast areas at once. That is how the Minerve was found at more than 2,300 meters. Once a promising contact appears, a remotely operated vehicle goes down to look, to photograph the wreck, and to confirm its identity. Survey vessels such as the Fugro Equator used related methods to locate the AE1, but the true starting point is often on land, in an archive. The corrected coordinate that found the Grayback and the translated records that found the Grunion came from patient research by people like Yutaka Iwasaki and from the Lost 52 Project's mission to locate every one of the 52 American submarines lost in the war. Cost and depth still set limits. Some sites remain out of reach, and some, like war graves, are surveyed under strict rules against disturbance. The Minerve's 3 broken hull sections and the Grayback's shattered bow were both documented this way, imaged carefully and left in place. In just 50 years, the search moved from the bathyscaphe Archimede, groping in the dark in 1969, to autonomous robots mapping the abyss in 2019. That is a single working lifetime, and it turned several permanent mysteries into solved cases, and all of it serves a human purpose. Behind every one of these boats is a list of names, and behind every name, people who waited. The Abeli brothers spent the better part of a decade chasing the Grunion, the submarine that took their father, and they found her. In France, it was the families of the Minerve's crew who kept pressing until the search reopened and the boat was finally located after 51 years. When the AE1 was found in 2017, descendants of the lost crew gathered for memorials a full century after the men disappeared. There's a particular kind of grief that comes with no wreck and no grave, a loss that stays open because there is nowhere to stand and mourn. When a boat is finally found, something shifts. The Grayback families gained a resting place after 3 generations of not knowing. Public memory matters too, the way Poland still holds the Orzeł as a national legend, her escape taught and dramatized. War grave status gives relatives a promise that the site will be protected and left undisturbed. But that promise cannot be made for every crew. The families connected to the Surcouf, the Corvina, and the Escolar are still waiting and may always wait. There is a tension in these stories that never fully resolves between the hunger for an answer and the sense that the dead have found their place and should be left in peace. That tension is where the whole subject finally settles. The sea rarely explains itself. That is the thread running through all 10 of these boats. Some were taken by mines, some by torpedoes, some by their own failing valves, and some by causes no inquiry could ever name. What surprises most is how often the thing that hit a submarine was not the ocean at all, but a human error, a mistyped digit, a wrong set of coordinates, a report filed in a language no one reread for decades. Technology is catching up. Autonomous vehicles now map depths that swallowed these crews whole, and each wreck that is found rewrites a small piece of history and closes a file that had been open for a lifetime. But the ocean is vast and deep, and 4 of these boats are still out there, unlocated, their stories unfinished. We keep searching anyway, out of memory, out of duty, and out of the simple human need to know where our dead rest. The deep water is both a hiding place and a keeper. It preserves machines with startling patience, and it holds the men inside them. These 10 submarines trace an arc through everything the sea can do. The fame of the Orzeł, the sheer scale of the Surcouf, the half-century patience demanded by the Minerve, and the blank unanswerable accident of the S-28. There is no triumphant ending here, only an honest one. Somewhere in the dark water, the vanished are still keeping their secrets, and the sea is in no hurry to give them up.